What happened to the lost tween phase?
Where a woman was talking to her therapist and she said, "When do I get to feel like an adult? When do I get to feel like an adult?" And she said her therapist looked at her and said, "Have you ever considered that because you were forced into a position of adulthood at a very young age, it's not that you don't feel like an adult, it's that you felt like an adult since you were young, since you were a child. You've forgotten what childhood is supposed to feel like."
Tweens are ages 9 to 12, and they're in the between stage of being a kid and transitioning into their teens. And I've noticed that lately, the tween phase is gone. There are no longer any tweens, and things that were once cool for tweens are now considered to be cringy and not cool anymore. So I kind of wanted to talk about what happened to the tween phase. Where did it go, and why does it not exist any longer?
Before we get into it, a brief history of the creation of the teenager. In the 19th century in America, the world consisted of children and adults. There wasn't a teen identity yet, and child labor practices still existed, although more and more states were passing restrictions against it. Because of this, children began to spend more time in school. Parents also were waiting longer to marry off their children, and the teenage phase was starting to become a reality in America right around the 1920s. A big factor in this was the automobile technology. This led to a richer dating culture among teens because they no longer had to stay within the house to date. They could go out on the town. Also, the creation of consolidated high schools because buses could now transport students farther from their homes. Americans also were realizing the potential of a longer education, and states were adding more years to schooling. However, after experiencing the Great Depression, followed by World War II, adolescents were expected to restrain from frivolous or social activities and excessive spending, and instead work full-time in order to support their families. After this difficult period for youth, there was a turning point, and this allowed for the birth of teenage culture. Since baby boomers were moving into adolescence at this time with more disposable income and free time than generations before, they were able to enjoy more material comfort. And thus, they dedicated more time and money to leisure activities, and they consumed more pop culture than ever before. The adolescents of the 1950s began to rebel against adult authority, and teenage culture, as we know it, was invented. Artists like Elvis Presley and the Beatles were very popular at this time, and identities around the teenager became more rich. Now, bringing in marketing, marketers only started to really target the youth, starting with Gen Xers. They would market to mothers specifically in hopes that they would buy products for their kids, and it wasn't until millennials came around that they began to directly market to the youth. And youth culture from then on has become way more complex as more factors are now involved with the digital age. Marketers are largely losing sight of how to exactly connect with youth. And so we reach our dilemma. How is society going to attempt to continue to hold space for a dedicated youth culture? Or will we go back to a time where teenage culture didn't exist?
So for a lot of us millennials and older Gen Z folk, we remember a time when it was considered a little bit more cool to be a tween and be interested in things that weren't necessarily geared towards adults. So let me take you down memory lane to set the stage. So the first thing is we actually had stores that were dedicated to us, that were thriving, because there might be stores that are dedicated to tweens now, but clearly tweens are not wearing it. We had things like Limited 2, which was the it place for all the girls back in the day.
Hola chica, I got my sparkly jeans and my green crochet top. I'm talking full on rodeo. If I had a horse, I would so totally ride it to school.
When you had your play date, you went to the mall, the first thing you did was go to Limited 2. It was a little bit pricey, but it was just a magical land, and I didn't always necessarily get anything, but it was just the it girl clothing. And when you went in the store, things were age appropriate, super colorful. The design was actually really nice. I wasn't really aware of what the older girls were wearing. I just knew what people around my age were wearing, maybe one grade above, and they were into Limited 2 as well. I remember going shopping with my older sister and her friends, and they were going to Limited 2. They were 2 years older than me, so that just shows that you were still trying to emulate someone that was older than you, but since there wasn't any social media, you only could copy people that were in your grade and maybe 2 grades above. And since there was actually a clothing store for us to go to, it was just perfect. Disney Channel was also in their heyday. I'm telling you, they were in their bag. We had That's So Raven, the Lizzie McGuire Show. We had Hannah Montana. We had so many endless. Phil of the Future. The list goes on. I'm telling you, we had all the hits, and all of those shows were extremely popular. All these shows would be talked about on the news. This is how big these shows were at the time. These were age-appropriate shows, and you looked up to the celebrities. It was really just like a subculture, like the girls who got it, got it. The episodes dropped at 8, 7 Central. Friday night, you were on your couch and you were watching the newest episode. And when you went back to school on Monday, you talk about the show. And it was okay. You could talk about it with your friends and no one's going like, oh, that's cringy. Why are you watching Disney Channel? That's for babies. There was, I guess you could say, a silo in the sense that you were in your grade. You only knew what people your age were doing. And even the girls 2 grades above you were still watching Disney Channel. If they said they weren't, they were lying. Hannah Montana was super popular and she transitioned with us. We grew up with Hannah Montana. Then she went into her Miley phase and we know how that went. She was 18, she couldn't be tamed, and we were growing up right there with her. We were like, yes, girl, yes. And by then we were teens, so it was a little bit more appropriate. The point is, there were stars and there were Disney Channel shows that were cool to be with. A lot of those stars are still famous today because they had really good marketing. One, it wasn't cringy to be into their TV shows, so their careers were able to transition into adulthood because we were transitioning right there with them. Anyway, Justin Bieber, he was the rage. He's still popular now because he took his following into his adult age, and it was okay to be into things that were actually marketed towards your age. There was that culture and that safe space to be into age appropriate things. We also had magazines that were particularly aimed at us. Everyone remembers 17. We had Popstar, we had Tiger. The graphics on these magazines would be so wild. They'd be so like in your face, you couldn't ignore them. When you were in the grocery store, you would be reading it while your mom was checking out. You went to Barnes and Nobles or Borders, you would be in that magazine section reading the magazines, and you were up on the latest kitty gossip. Who's Miley Cyrus dating now? Who's Nick Jonas dating now? Who's Selena Gomez with? Magazines have kind of died with social media and just the online age. People aren't really reading magazines anymore because they're online, and people are going to opt for things like TikTok and social media instead, and they weren't really able to transition their magazine platform into a digital format that's actually sticking with people. We also had movies that were carefully curated and made for us. Those Disney movie premieres still hit to this day. Tell me the Cheetah Girls doesn't hit. Tell me the Princess Diaries isn't a good movie to this day. These were movies that performed extremely well. Blockbuster hits. And that's because they had a demographic. They had a demographic that wouldn't think, oh, it's cringy. There is a Mean Girls reboot right now, but people aren't really into it because of the wardrobe. It's not really giving, and it's also a musical. That just goes to show that it is really hard to market towards tweens. I will say that it's probably more so millennials and people that are like really into Mean Girls that are really upset with it, because I liked Mean Girls, but I'm like, they tried. I'm just happy they tried. I don't want to anger the people into Mean Girls. There was just a culture back then where there was age-appropriate movies that were geared towards teens, and we loved it. We ate it up, and they made a lot of money off of it. But now it's just dying. Movies in general are just dying because a lot of things are going towards digital and streaming. It's harder to market those things, and there's just so much competition that I think a lot of people are giving up on creating movies for tweens. I think the main difference is just that we didn't have social media. We were in a bit more of a silo. There was Facebook is probably the most popular one that we had. I think some of the older millennials will remember MySpace, but I will say I was too young for MySpace. I think with social media came this like shaming of being a tween where you're a bit more awkward. You're into pop stars, you follow them. You know, you might just have a little bit more awkward interest, but it was okay. It was celebrated, and marketers were able to curate things for that particular age range where you're into those sort of things. Tweens have just decided to skip that phase altogether and move right on to whatever the teens and adults are into. With social media, we've just really removed a lot of the safe space, if you want to say, for tweens to have that awkward phase. And marketers have just given up on it. I think a lot of marketers have just realized that it's not working anymore because of social media and the exposure that kids have had to what adults are into. I think with social media and the digital age and the internet, you can just research to your heart's desire what are older kids and adults into, and you don't really have to research much. The content is just pushed to you. And so you can emulate teens and adults and young adults and whatnot way faster than ever before, way faster than when I was in that age range. And so now when we look at what tweens have, we see that they're into adult clothing, they're into makeup, they're into skincare. They don't really look like their age. Now, when you look at a lot of the idols that are for tween age ranges, 9 to 12, you see that a lot of them are just mini young adult influencers. They're doing exactly what the young adult influencers are doing. They're getting paid to do it, so they have the money to do it. So when you look at North, Penelope, and Travis Barker's daughter, you see that they especially have the income and the ability to emulate young adults even more, even easier than their other child celebrity influencer. Kids are going to see this and they're going to want to emulate that as well. I think the fashion and the makeup are the big thing that make them not look like their kids. And then when you see that they're watching the same TikToks as you, buying the same products as you, like all the stuff is pretty much the same, that's when you go, wow, like there's no more tween age. There's no more marketing for this demographic. I think they've just given up and they've realized that things for adults are winning, and that's where they're deciding to put their money. And it's really unfortunate because like there's a demographic of parents that are willing to spend money on what their tweens are interested in. So if a company decided to make products that were like adult products, but tweenified, like such a huge market there. And there is like a thriving market for kids. Like we have Coco Melon, we have so many things for like babies and like up to 5 years old. But once you get past that, they are up for grabs, and whatever catches their attention, it is what it is. A lot of boys fall into the red pill trap. I know we talk a lot about girls when it comes to Gen Alpha, but the boys as well, they're getting into some concerning stuff too. They are on the red pill side of the internet. That is not where they need to be. And I don't think those influencers even know that they're following our children. Like Sneeko got approached, I think, by some literal boys, and they said some problematic things, and he was just kind of taken off guard because it's like, you didn't actually think that you were influencing the kids, but surprise, surprise, the kids are on the internet.
What did you take? What? No, wait.
Sneeko.
We love women. We love women. We love women.
But not like transgenders.
Yes, sir. We love yeah, merch, preach. What have I done?
The parents are not watching what they're into anymore. They're just giving them the iPad and letting them have a field day. I'm sure this is a certain minority of Gen Alpha. Not everyone is privileged enough to be buying what adults are buying. Not everyone has an iPad. Not everyone has access to these sort of things. But from the sense of the marketplace, from the sense of the safe space for tweens, there is no more space or marketing that is being done for them. I hope that it becomes cool for tweens to be their age, act their age, and be into things that are dedicated for them. It sucks that they're not able to just live in their age and they're just feeling rushed to be adults. And I understand that we all had that feeling. I feel like society did a better job of transitioning us and making us feel like we were into adult things without really exposing us to what adults were into. I hope social media puts more effort towards preventing kids to be on certain sides of their application. They probably don't want to increase authentication factors because that might lose the user. Clearly it's a problem because we're seeing the effects of it live. Yeah, I just hope more people decide to curate content for tweens, and I hope that tweens, most of all, stop thinking things are cringe and stop trying to grow up faster than, they should, and faster than is necessary. Because once you're an adult, you're going to wish you were a kid again. So that's all I have for you guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.